Good evening, everybody. The meeting is called to order. Both John and Dana both designated as voting members tonight. That gives us a compliment. And the agenda tonight is Manitoba Woodland subdivision. That is the only item on the agenda, but there's a lot to talk about, obviously. Before we get started on the details, just a few things I wanted to mention. First of all, our primary purpose tonight is for the planning board to deliberate on this application and hopefully make a decision. But there are some other matters that we'll need to deal with as well. I do want to say too that this review process has unfolded over the past however many months and has certainly resulted in a lot of additions and modifications to the application that was originally submitted. And I think that throughout that process, many of the concerns and the questions that have been raised by interested parties have been satisfactorily addressed. As I was going back through all of my material and my notes, there was a lot of difference between the original submission and what we're working with now. The applicant has made a lot of changes in response to comments and issues that were raised. Obviously, we're not quite at the finish line yet. Hopefully, we'll get there this evening. But I do want to thank in particular all of the interested parties who come forward with questions and comments, both in the hearings and also in the written submissions. Those comments and the materials that we've provided and the perspectives have been really invaluable to the planning board. I can't stress that enough. It's been incredibly helpful to have that from you. So thank you. We appreciate that deeply. Thanks to the applicant. You were responsive, you were willing to listen and participate and make modifications, and you made a long and somewhat difficult process easier for that, and we thank you for that. Procedurally, I just wanted to remind everyone of where we are with this application. I think it's important that as we continue, everyone has a common understanding of where we are with the application and where we've been and why. It was determined at the outset to be a major subdivision, and there is a body of regulation and process that addresses major subdivisions specifically. And as you'll all recall, it involves a three-stage review process, which makes for a lengthier process, but given the complexities of a major subdivision, the LUO calls that out and assigns this process to it in particular. So beginning with a sketch plan review, preliminary plan, and then the final plan, which is what is before us tonight. The timeline for this application, initially, the planning board first discussed the preliminary application when it came to us on the 9th of April of last year. So it's been, since then, about 14 months, 6 months of which really was spent in submissions coming together and being submitted to the planning board in response to specific issues and questions that were raised. The planning board found that preliminary application complete in August of last year, but leading up to that, had requested on a couple of occasions additional information to be made part of the application in mid-May of last year. There were specific requests by the planning board for additional information. And in mid-July, we received that submission. The application was found complete in August. In August, there were a lot of public comments. Many issues were raised, and the planning board had specifically requested that the applicant respond to those in writing. That took a while to put together. It was detailed and extensive. So that request was made in September at the time of the public hearing, and in mid-December, that written response was submitted. In January of 25, January of this year, we held the public hearing on that final application, and the preliminary plan, excuse me. And in February, the planning board approved the preliminary. So since then, we've been looking at the final plan, which was submitted and was found complete in April, and the public hearing was held on May 13th. And most of you were there. So, as you know, early in June, Chip was contacted by Meredith Lee and her attorney with concerns about ownership of the abandoned county road. And we've discussed that a bit. On the 11th of June at our regular meeting, the parties presented information about that issue. And we set a deadline of the 20th of June to provide a written submission to see if the parties, the applicant and Ms. Lee and her attorney, could work the issue out. The concern as it evolved was that some of the infrastructure, the stormwater infrastructure, road infrastructure that's been put in place by Ms. Lee and her contractor, there were concerns about the integrity of that, given the road improvement plans put forward by the applicant. So we did receive a submission on the 20th of June as requested. But my understanding is that that submission has been superseded by one that was delivered this evening earlier. And so we'll need to hear about that in just a minute. So the order of business tonight, we need to hear from the parties about that issue and about the agreement. We'll have some conversation around it, see where that goes. And depending on the outcome of that, we'll either determine that we need to take additional steps or move forward, but we need to see, what the situation is exactly before we do that. I was prepared to allow interested parties to briefly comment or ask questions about this revised plan. We have not closed the hearing at this point, and you may recall at the last meeting, we took a vote and specifically left the hearing open, but only for information concerning this specific issue. So I don't know if there will be questions or comments. If there are, we will allow those. But I do want to caution that it's not an opportunity to comment on issues other than this one. And I would ask you to keep that in mind, that it shouldn't precipitate additional debate on issues that we've already heard in previous hearings. That it's strictly limited to this issue before us. Changes made to the road plan in response to this week's issue. Following that, we'll talk about the deliberative process a bit, but I think that I'd like to get this issue on the table so we can have a conversation about it. I don't know what works best for you. I'll leave it to you. Applicant, Ms. Lee, I don't know if it makes sense for you to present first, if you want to talk about it together. Tell me what works best, given what you've looked at here.
From my perspective, Madam Chairman, I'm going to defer to my attorney. So Andrew is on, Zoom, and he will speak on my behalf.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does just 1 minute. I'm assuming that would work for you if we hear first from Ms. Lee's attorney and then give you an opportunity to respond. All right, Mr. Ketterer, please go ahead.
Thank you. So Andrew Ketterer on behalf of Meredith Lee. Just as a quick refresher, as you've already mentioned previously, we had objected to the board's authority to dictate what a third party does on the property that reverted back to Ms. Lee in 1984. You had touched on that just a moment ago. Notwithstanding that, Ms. Lee and Mr. Lawrence and the Lovejoy Group have come to an agreement just late in the day today as to the use of the right-of-way that encumbers the west end or the west edge of Ms. Lee's land, but only to the extent as exactly shown on the plans dated today. I know that there was a submission on the 20th, but there has been a new set of plans that has today's date. I think Mr. Lawrence has them with him today. There should be a little date at the bottom on the right side that says 6/24. So to the extent that it's those plans, we have come to an agreement as it relates to the use of Ms. Lee's land. So our objection at this point is moot as to the board's authority, but we reserve the right to make that objection in the future if necessary. But at this point, based on the plans that were sent over at 4 o'clock, we do have an agreement.
Should I ask the applicant, or can you describe for us generally what that agreement entails and how it's different from the one that you presented on the 20th?
Sure, absolutely. I can cover some of that if Mr. Lawrence or his engineers want to jump in. They certainly can, but I can be very brief with it. So if you look at the plans, they're oriented so that north is to the right. And the Juniper Lane runs south to north, with Ms. Lee's property being on the east side of Juniper Lane. Previously, the east shoulder of Juniper Lane was much further, not much, was a bit further to the east, and it showed it crossing different culverts and ditches and low spots and whether you want to call it a sediment basin or a plunge pool or a drain pond, that it was crossing some of that, and there had been discussion with Ms. Lee and Mr. Lawrence about the amount of these pools that would sort of either need to be filled or otherwise modified. And what we ultimately came to the agreement with was that the road would be held just a couple of feet to the west in that area, which is what's shown. If you compare the 620 plans to the 624 plans, you can kind of see a little bit of almost like a dog leg that just holds the road a tiny bit to the west to allow the retention pools or the drain pools to remain intact as was previously dictated by the town. I think Chip was in on that as well as the road commissioner. And so it keeps those drain pools, ditches, low spots to the east of Juniper Lane, keeps those intact as they currently are. There also was a small issue regarding a utility pole that CMP dictated the location of that was shown in a different spot on the plans. That was adjusted, and different notations were added to the plans, including protecting certain culverts, low spots, ditches, pools. You can see that the west side of Juniper Lane does now cross a currently existing drain pool. I think the plans are to maybe fill some of that. But in short, it holds a little bit of the road just a couple of feet to the west. It's still within what was previously the right of way, and addresses all of the concerns that Ms. Lee had. I'm not an engineer, but I think that I appropriately am describing the modifications. And if you do sort of have a side by side of the plans, you can see that the road is a little bit different of a spot. And from the last meeting, there were several elements that currently exist that were approved and dictated by the town several months ago that Ms. Lee put in that were omitted from the plans. Those have since been added back to the plans to show what's there and what's existing and what will stay.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Keller before we hear from? Yeah.
Is there an agreement as to how maintenance of the road is going to be handled? This isn't part of the road association.
I'm sorry if that was a question for me. I couldn't totally make out what it was. I apologize.
Who's the question for? For Ms. Lee, I guess. Is there an agreement as to maintenance of the road section that's your property?
The maintenance. We haven't gotten to that yet, so.
We haven't gotten to that yet. And address that when I'm given a chance.
Any other questions for Mr. Keller before we hear from the applicant?
This new plan, which of course you all just received, happened because we had met with the abutter and their attorney multiple times, had multiple discussions, and came to this solution. And we were literally drawing this afternoon. So it's been quite a process last couple of weeks. I think conversations have been friendly and useful and practical, and we've come up with this final design. I don't need to describe the changes in detail because Mr. Ketterer did a great job doing that. In fact, if you're looking for maybe opening a mainland branch in Florida, we should talk. You did a great job describing all of that. There's a couple of new notes suggesting or demanding or requiring protection of some of the infrastructure that's on the inside of the public easement, and a wiggle in the road. That wiggle in the road is not going to be terribly noticeable. It was a couple of feet. It also lines up pretty well with the first part of Manitoba Camp Road, which was always the intent to begin with. So the town of Readfield does not have a requirement that a road center line equal the public easement center line or a right-of-way center line. Some towns have that requirement. This town does not. It has a requirement that the edge of travel way be at least 8 feet from the property line, and this exceeds that. So that all works. The upstream basin will be protected. The downstream basin will be partially impacted. The road will get by. The only change was in that very section by a couple of feet. It was very, very, very minor. Otherwise, stormwater flows the way it always has, and all of that. It's a very minor change. The issue of maintenance, Jack, thank you for asking that. The applicant has said for quite a while now that this subdivision will be maintaining the road. If others want to join, that's great. The abutter lead there was an offer to do that, and we haven't heard back yet, but the bottom line is that this subdivision will maintain the stretch of road from here all the way out. That's what we've offered to do from the beginning. And so that, Jack, I think that should hopefully answer your question. The subdivision will maintain the road.
Where was that shown?
It's in your bylaws that we've been submitted.
But Mr. Barry,
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, my reading of the bylaws is, yes, the road association will be responsible for maintaining the road, but the bylaws indicated to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that to the extent that the road crosses over non-members of the development, the subdivision, you can seek contribution from them for the cost of maintenance.
There is a state statute that requires people to join up into the association. I am not prepared to talk about the legalities of that.
There's a
bottom-
letter in the record from your counsel on that issue.
Is there? Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's in our record. I'm trying to remember your lawyer's name who wrote the letter.
David McCollum,
Thank you.
County Title. Yeah, he prepared the road association, it was done by an attorney. We did not do that ourselves.
With that, I have no further things to present. I'm happy to answer questions or absolutely.
Well, while we're talking about roads, one of the questions that I had, and I might as well ask it now. We've talked about this. There's a period of time, obviously, before the road association is established and in a position to be maintaining the road and so forth. I could not find in the application where it stated specifically that the applicant would be responsible for road and infrastructure maintenance until that point when the association could take it over. Do you know where that is in the application materials? I suspect it's there, but I could not find it when I looked.
I don't know. I'll need some time, maybe when others. Oh, Peter,
The only evidence we have is Mr. McCullum's letter, which I finally found, dated March 31, 2025. Says, please note that you, as the developer, Mr. Lawrence, please note that you, as the developer, will initially be responsible for the maintenance and repair costs of both Juniper Lane and the Manitoba Camp Road. Once you start selling the lots, says Mr. McCullum, the lot owners of the association will be responsible for their proportionate share of the costs.
thank you. That would have taken me 20 minutes to find. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, and in my mind, it's different having your lawyer tell you that rather than you putting it in the application and saying, we're going to do this. So it may be something you want to consider as a condition at some point, just to ensure that it's there and it's
I take no objection to that being a conditional approval. All set?
Any questions for Mr. Berry? Planning board?
I've got a clarifying question regarding the roadway corridor. You mentioned, alluded to the legality of that, discussed in the last meeting, June 11th. If it's my understanding, and this is why I want to be clear, that everybody's clear on this, is that road corridor was a public right of way until 1960 something. When the road was closed, it still remained a public corridor, so the land underneath was owned by the public. Then in the 80s, it was abandoned, at which point the land underneath reverted to the abutters who meant to the center line of the road. So now the land is actually owned by the private entity, not the town. That's correct. And that where the right of way line was is now a public easement line. Am I clear on that?
That's not quite correct, but it's been main law for many, many decades that when a road is abandoned, the ownership under the road reverts to the center line, to the owner, to the center line. And that there's a remaining, however, public easement.
That's right, public easements retained for the public to cross.
Yeah.
So that the property underneath that easement is the adjoining abutters that went to the center line of the road, right? So on the plan, it's not being shown like that, it's still shown as if it's a public right of way. I don't know if that makes any difference or not, but
Having lived on a private road many times, it's still owned by the abutters. But under the agreement of what we're going through right now, that becomes a public right-of-way road. The owners own it. It's on their records as such. They're not taxed on it because it's shared as a public right-of-way.
okay, so then I'm confused as to then if if it's private ownership, but yet the public can go over it and has access rights. It's kind of what Mr. Ketterer was bringing is the authority of someone to go on someone's private property to make damages to it. If that's private. So I guess I'm confused as to what's being shown on the plan appears to be a public right of way, when in fact it's privately owned with a public easement, which is different than a right of way. And I don't know if Mr. Berry can clarify that for everybody here or not. I don't know. I'm just a little confused of what's being said and what's being shown versus what's being told, so.
And your concern is what?
Well, if that is in fact private property, it's not being shown as such on the plans, because it's being shown as a public right of way there. In my opinion, that's what it's being shown of with all the legends and line diagrams and everything. It looks like the property line goes right to the edge of the old abandoned road right of way, which is now the public easement line. And that the property line should go to the center line of the old abandoned roadway corridor based on the letter from 1988 from the town, the road guy, and I think based upon what Mr. Ketterer was alluding to or asserting to in June 11th meeting.
So if they change the name to a public easement instead of a private road, would that make a difference?
No, I'm just one. It's just a little minor detail that I'm getting caught up on because it looks like it's a public right of way.
I'm not sure what it is about the plan that causes you to say it's a.
So it's showing that, for instance, lot 18, which is on the Minnetonka Camp Road, is right here, and the property line is showing down here across the old abandoned right of way to its part over here, when in fact it should go to the center line, just like Ms. Lee should, just like Mr. Knight should, just like Mr. Lawrence's lot should, and everything else should. But I don't know if that's depicted correctly or not correctly, and I'm just looking for an answer from you, Mr. Barry, if you can explain that a little bit on the technicalities of the easement versus the right of way, so we're all.
The easement and the right of way are synonymous. Okay?
No, they're not.
No, yes, there could be a private right of way versus a public easement, or there could be a private easement. But easement and right of way are synonymous.
It's
The land under an abandoned road reverts to the abutter to the center line. But the road is not, the road is an easement.
Well, the road and the right of way are two different things. The road itself is the access to go across. I'm not debating that. I'm not saying that that's not the case. I'm just wondering, is the plan depicted correctly that the property ownership goes to the center line of the old abandoned right of way based upon what happened in 1988? And I'm not a surveyor. I don't know the laws, but it seems from what I'm reading and from what Mr. Ketterer asserted in June 11th meeting is that basically there is no public ownership of land underneath the road in the easement. That's all privately owned, but the plan's not depicting it as being privately owned. It's being depicted as a public right of way. And I just don't, public right of meaning that the land underneath is owned by the public, not that the public can access it.
I would assume that, I mean, the plan is silent on the issue of ownership because it doesn't need to reflect the ownership. I mean, it's a public right of way, which is the important piece. I think everyone agrees that the property underneath, we've had that discussion.
Is privately owned.
Is, yes, but there is, as Peter pointed out, the easement. Mr. Ketterer, do you have anything to add to all of that?
I don't have too much to add. A right of way is a type of easement. They're not necessarily different. It's sort of a subcategory, but that's probably too in the reeds for this. But I would also be of the opinion that what is shown on these plans is irrelevant to ownership. And I'm not necessarily speaking, I guess, on behalf of Miss Lee at this point, but just in general, these plans don't control for who owns what.
Right.
That's dictated by deeds, and it's dictated by public records. It's not dictated by these plans. I would agree that the plans do not show what we also believe the ownership to be, as was just mentioned. But I don't, I'll stop there. Hopefully that's helpful.
So this plan, purpose of this plan
I'm
is
good.
to address construction issues, basically, where certain features are going to be located, how the road is going to be constructed in relationship to the various properties. And as I said, I mean, it appears to me to be silent on the ownership question, which wouldn't need to be addressed in a plan of that sort, I wouldn't think.
Thank you for clarifying.
I would like to make a comment based on this discussion and Mr. McCollum's letter. This is the letter that you referred to. You know,
Could you?
I'm sorry. My name's Warren Norris. I'm a Camden. In Mr. McCollum, their attorney's letters regarding the cost and responsibility. However, the association that refers to Lovejoy Development Association can choose to seek compensation from other property owners that use Minnesota Camp Road. And it refers to a particular rule which says that if more than one property shares a common benefit from a private road, each property owner who shares the common benefit is responsible for a share of the cost of reasonable and necessary repairs to and maintenance of that private road determined pursuant to the terms of any agreement entered into. That's the point. We don't have any agreement with Minnesota Association. Our homeowner association has been left out of any conversation related to anything that would relate to expense of maintaining that first 425 feet of road. So basically a road could be built, a bill could be sent, but we have no agreement. So what is our obligation to pay for any kind of maintenance of that 425 feet of road, which is our common use road, the one used facility? There hasn't been any agreement sent to us or any negotiation or anything. So we don't know what our obligation in the future is going to be. We could just get a bill, a substantial bill with a requirement to pay it, and we have no idea what that's for.
Was it you that had mentioned the state statute? Or was
Yeah.
it-
Well, no, but Mr. McCullum.
Okay. So,
It would appear to me, first of all, if there's no agreement, then the non-members of the association can say, we don't want you maintaining our portion. We're not gonna pay for you, we're not agreeing for you to maintain it. But under the statute, if they do maintain it, there may be a contribution under the statute.
So the first part of the road is being used by the state of Manitoba control and subdivision.
yes.
But the new subdivision is responsible for maintenance of it, and Ken Manitoba is not.
Where is it saying it?
We're currently responsible for it. We do our own maintenance over the last 34 years. So he's going to come in and make some improvements, probably access his property through Meredith's. You've got to go across that same road. And at some point he's going to repair it or and that's what we don't know what's going to happen with that.
Either John or Bob, do you have anything you'd like to say to address that situation?
We would like to remind the board that we did try to negotiate earlier on, go well, it didn't progress. So the solution was simply that this subdivision will maintain the road all the way out the main road. And that is still the plan. If there are options available to us, when I say us, the subdivision, the applicant, if there are legal options for them later, and that's the law, that they will pursue or not pursue it at their pleasure, but the application is that the applicant and then the subdivision road association will maintain the road, Juniper Lane, all the way out to the lake.
You're not talking about, trying to, ask these people to contribute to that, right, at this point?
At this point, no. What the road association does later, that's a question mark, but that won't be the applicant or us at this time.
Right.
Initially, the road will be approved and then maintained by the applicant until such time as the road association is actually formed, then they will. At the negotiation, and something might happen at that point, we can't give away our future rights on that. This project, we're looking for approval at some point on this project, so this is our solution to doing that. We will maintain it. It's a public easement, we have the right to maintain it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question for Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but.
Yes, I can.
How is the agreement between Ms. Lee and the applicant, how is that memorialized? Is there an addendum to an easement or something like that, or?
No. So our agreement basically is let me back up. Because we didn't receive the plans until 4:00 today, we don't have some signed agreement or memorialization between the parties. We did exchange sort of bullets and emails of concerns that we had, and the Lovejoy group kind of answered them and made certain statements that reflect an agreement. But there is not a traditional sort of signed at the bottom type agreement currently, if for no other reason than just the shortness of time. By the time we had reviewed the plans, then this meeting was starting in 55 minutes or something. So, but our objections were related to what was shown on the plans. Now seeing the plans as drafted with today's date, we don't have an objection as long as the work that is done is in accordance with those plans and as reflected on those plans. And the things that are noted on those plans are shown. And the plan is to go forward, at least that's my understanding, with what is shown on those plans. If it deviates from that, that's not part of what the agreement is. But that, in conjunction with the sort of bullet point issue discussion that was exchanged between Lovejoy and Ms. Lee, we feel covers all of its bases, and I think Mr. Lawrence would probably agree with that.
Yes, we agree.
So you don't see any particular reason to have a standalone agreement as long as this plan is approved and it's implemented the way it's presented?
Yes, that's correct. Our agreement is expressly limited to exactly what's on those plans. Let me qualify that, as to the extent of the property that is owned by Ms. Lee, we understand that property to the east and property to the south and property to the north are outside of Ms. Lee's control, and therefore we have no opinion on one way or another on the areas of the land that are outside of Ms. Lee's property.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or discussion about this plan? You know, I would mention that the earlier plan, which apparently did not reflect that slight change in the location of the road, and as I understand it, some of the notes about the structures and maintaining those. That earlier plan had been shared with the town manager in his capacity as road commissioner. And because the question came up about whether or not a new plan required approval of the road committee or not, his assessment was that the changes were minor enough that he did not see it necessary to seek that approval. And I'm assuming that based on what we've heard tonight, that the response would be the same with regard to this plan. It doesn't seem to be different in any significant. Any other questions about this plan? How it fits into the whole? Okay, thank you very much for, yes.
I just want to take a moment to thank the board. It's been a long road, as my granddad would say. There's been a lot of comments from the abutters. I agree with Madam Chairwoman. It's made the project stronger, made it better. We appreciate it. Thank you for all your time. It's been a long way.
Which we're not yet to the end of.
I know. I just wanted to say that, I wasn't sure I could say that.
Okay, so the planning board had voted to keep the hearing open to receive information about this plan, which we've done. So I would take a motion at this point to close the hearing.
Move to close the hearing. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? So that moves us to the point of deliberation, and that's an opportunity for planning board members to discuss among ourselves the issues that have come up, what's in front of us, whether or not we believe the application meets the standards, and how to proceed with it, basically. There may be points in our conversation where we have questions either for interested parties or for the applicant. But at this point, with the hearing closed, there is not an opportunity for additional comment by any of the parties. So I would look to planning board members for your thoughts about how you want to proceed with this deliberation. I had a couple of thoughts and maybe a recommendation. There have been several prominent issues that have come up repeatedly throughout the course of review of this application, stormwater being one of them. And my thought was that it might be best to discuss those issues first, one at a time. And then I think at a point, we should go back and look at each of the site review standards. Some of them are minor in relationship to this application, but I would like to go through those as a group to ensure that we're not missing anything and that there aren't any additional thoughts that planning board members have about any of those standards. Is there a particular order that you would like to go in? What do you think works best? We can pull out those major issues. We could go standard by standard. Whatever you think would work best in terms of discussion. I had kind of a short list of the issues that rose to the top for me. Those are certainly stormwater. We heard about that repeatedly, and I think that's something that we need to discuss. We heard about wells and groundwater supply. There were a couple of requests for notification of construction schedule, notifying buyers about the no waterfront access issue. The issue of road construction specs has come up a couple of times, and at what point there will be road construction plans in place. And then the issue that we just talked about, the maintenance of the roads and so forth. But again, a couple that are prominent on my list are stormwater and the well issue that was discussed. And we can certainly add others to that list.
So, the issue for me, the remaining issue for me is the stormwater management. And, I think when this started off, we proposed to have a wooded buffer area around rain gardens or whatever, but what I feel that is missing is using, here's a development in the woods, but it doesn't seem to rely on the woods to help deal with stormwater. And I'm unclear about it, so I might be mistaken, but it would seem like people who are buying in the woods are gonna keep some of the woods. And so, for example, if there was a 25-foot buffer around each property line, a wooded buffer, that would help with stormwater runoff. And our ordinance calls for using natural features like wooded buffers. And the best management practices will also say to use them, but I don't really see them being used. And the reliance on the fire pond and the weir will require ongoing oversight and maintenance, which may or may not happen. But designating a wooded buffer area, that's sort of a no-cut area, except for maybe disease or dead or dangerous trees or something, might help deal with stormwater. Because I am concerned about the amount of stormwater that goes down that. I mean, it's always gone down that hill, but you're clearing it and making a road, and so it seems like it's going to be still a problem. So I was wondering whether you've thought about making a more wooded buffer. I'm not really sure what the light green area says that it's non-buildable area, natural vegetation. I'm not sure what's meant by natural vegetation. I'm not sure how big those areas are, whether there could be more of a wooded buffer.
Am I correct in assuming when I look at that plan, there's non-buildable area that's designated in light green, and then there is the buffer from the streams. I'm assuming that the non-buildable area between the lots is simply the side setback requirement, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So I don't know if other members of the planning board are concerned about stormwater management, like this could be a partial solution.
I would say if we have an issue with it and we want to hire an engineer at the town's expense and check the validity of the plans to get us comfortable with water management, then that's what we should do. But I don't, maybe some of you qualified, I'm not, to sit and look at it for it to see whether or not they complied or not complied. I mean, everything that they've gone through so far indicates that they've complied with all the regulations, the land use ordinance, everything that's required with DEP. And I don't know that I'm qualified to question whether or not they've complied or not, so I would say that we would need our own engineer.
I don't think they have complied with our ordinance.
What's that?
I don't think they have complied with our ordinance.
Okay, so maybe we should get an outside engineer.
I'm not saying that we need an outside person. We have the applicant here and the engineer. Some expertise in this board.
So what specifically have they not complied?
So you can look at the ordinance at the bottom of page 59 of the LDR. Would a possible existing natural runoff control features such as berms, swales, terraces, and wooded areas to be retained in order to reduce runoff and encourage infiltration of stormwater on the site in development?
So Paul, I mean, I'm new to the board, but shouldn't that have been an issue before we said that the application was complete?
I mean, an application being complete is different than the board deliberating and determining the standards of it.
But I mean, we're going back to question something that we said was complete, and now we're saying that it may not be complete, it may not comply with the land use ordinance. Shouldn't that have been determined during the review?
I mean, the review was essentially hearing from the applicant and from interested parties. And what we're commencing right now is the planning board's deliberation on, you know, the information that we've taken in, what we've heard. And it is the planning board's responsibility to determine if the standards have been complied with, you know, based on all of that information.
May I ask, is it appropriate to ask a question of Mr. Berry?
Yes, please go
Which
ahead.
of this? Mr. Berry, do the development plans contemplate bulldozing existing berms, swales, or terraces? Are you gonna flatten the land, or?
No, there will be earthwork for the road, there will be earthwork for the individual house sites. But no, there's no wholesale bulldozing of existing drainage features.
What about, Jack is saying there's nothing in the plan that requires that the homeowners, the ones who buy these lots, maintain wooded buffer zones. Am I understanding this correctly?
There is nothing in the ordinance that requires wooded buffer zones. We discussed this at some earlier point. And I'm gonna turn to the same plan, Jack, so maybe I'm just gonna try to help. Got lucky the first time. The brown areas is not necessarily what's going to be impacted. The brown areas simply depicts the building envelope where someone could impact and build a home. Can you see that? So it just shows the potential building area. I would anticipate that people would build, and their typical lot would take a portion of each of these, and there would be some wooded area in between. That's how most people prefer their homes, is to keep some sort of buffer between their homes. But we didn't want to dictate that to a lot buyer, that they had to have woods on either side of their home, that they could build lawn up to the property line. We felt that was a preferable option for people so they could do what they wanted on it. We've submitted stormwater application materials to you. We have, as a reminder, a main DEP permit by rule for stormwater specifically on this property. We've had it for a while now. And we have a DEP stormwater Natural Resource Protection Act permit by rule for the stream crossing right there. So we have met the stormwater standards for the town, for the DEP, as the plan says. Jack, you're not wrong. If we added buffers all over the place and added them between lots, that would improve stormwater. I can't tell you that wouldn't be the case. I would anticipate that would happen anyway. But we do not want to impact future lot owners there by saying, no, you have to leave this here. To why? Because we wanted it to be better. Yes, it would be better, but at some point we have to stop, and that threshold is defined by the ordinance and by the main DEP. I hope that, does that help?
Yes, but our ordinance does say that wooded areas shall be retained in order to reduce runoff and encourage infiltration. You're saying that's up to the homeowner, but our ordinance says that's a requirement.
In between the homes that we're saying no, but don't forget that half of the property is not proposed for development of any kind. There's woods all over the place. So DEP does, you mentioned the DEP what likes wooded buffers, and they do. But that's only one best management practice that may be suggested for people. There are a myriad of them, some of which are on this plan. So just we don't feel like we need to do extra above and beyond and thus impact what people can and can't do on their lot when they buy it.
Just to clarify a little, I share Jack's concern generally about stormwater and, when we began the discussion about this application and we're looking at the preliminary plan, there was conversation about all of this. As we got deeper into the process and we heard from interested parties, about the existing drainage situation, in that area. I think for me, my interest was certainly heightened by that. I think it's a difficult situation already. And I appreciate the concern on the part of interested parties about not allowing the situation to be exacerbated. I think in my own mind, I was trying to identify things that could enhance the stormwater control system. I'm not sure what those are that are appropriate. I mean, wooded buffers that Jack mentioned is that's certainly one way to do it. And
How do we know that? I mean, what's our
You just
qualification?
You just said wooded buffers would help.
There, I mean, there is a plan initially, right? You said natural vegetation. I feel like we're nitpicking this thing to death.
We often in improving developments require wooded buffers between houses, both for privacy and for stormwater control. And I don't understand why with rather large lots, there could be some required wooded buffer to reduce stormwater runoff, which is the goal of our ordinance here. I mean, you're saying that it'd be nice if people chose to maintain a wooded buffer, but we're not gonna require them to maintain a wooded buffer.
That's correct. These homeowners should have every right to use the property that they buy as they see fit, just like others across Readfield have done. And we need to code. You have a professional engineer stand the same. So I don't see the need to do more than the code if the applicant wants to the homeowners to have every right to use their land as they want. They can leave woods if they want to, but we don't see why they should be required by the town.
What do you mean by they meet the code?
The stormwater application materials that you have in your package meets the town code.
And the
Town
DEP.
code
And
is,
the DEP,
And you have a permit about that.
yes.
the town code is to minimize stormwater runoff. It doesn't have a set amount, and it's to keep wooded buffers. You're saying that whenever an applicant comes before us, we have no right to require a wooded buffer because that's interfering with rights of the property owner?
The town can ask, you guys can ask for whatever you want, and I'm glad we're having the discussion. We can have these discussions, that's fine. The applicant doesn't want wooded buffers between the lots. Now, stormwater runs generally down the plan, but that doesn't mean that it all runs from house to house to house. Some of it will run diagonally away, especially as you develop these houses. Usually there's some grading that happens around the house, so this house isn't gonna probably, well, I can't dictate because people will build what they want on their houses. For the house, they should be able to do that. But typically what you see is the water runs and then it runs out like this because somebody else built a house anyway. And then that goes out to the woods and it's being treated by forest that's out back. But if somebody wants a lot of yard, I don't know why they can't have it. They should be allowed that. It's their property when they buy it. So I would resist that.
So I don't understand the purpose of our ordinance that
Your ordinance says,
you're saying that the property owners determine it, we don't determine it.
I'm saying that what we presented meets code. And we have a lot of forested area on this land. That's what I'm saying.
Of course, there've been, in my mind, the stormwater control issue is the closest question and most difficult question to dealing with. And of course, there've been a lot of changes since the original plan. Thanks in part to comments from the butters and from questions from the board. Remember the fire pond, the weir. And in my mind, the ordinance does not require a wooded area. It says, it does say where possible, natural features should be retained, such as, and it lists several things, you know, not berms, terraces. So I don't think our ordinance mandates a particular wooded area. But would it be impossible to have even a covenant, your deeds having covenants requiring a certain number of trees, a few trees? Are you saying that wouldn't make any difference?
Okay, anything's possible. And anything that way is possible. I'm saying that your typical lot only impacts, what, quarter acre, half an acre at most. And most of these lots are 2, 3 like classes.
Some of them are
10, 6 lots, 6 acres. It's going to be mostly wooded as it is. That's what I'm saying.
No, I don't think the board has the authority to require them to put covenants in the deeds or around the things that we're specifically talking about. What's our authority here? I mean, what are we doing? We're suggesting that they go out there and hire attorneys and go back and rewrite deeds and put covenants in there to make us feel better when it's not required.
You could, I think the board has the authority to condition approval upon the lots having a certain amount of natural buffer. But I think the question is, more aptly, is whether this would really, whether it's necessary in this context. Mr. Berry's spoken to that, I believe.
Or whether we even have the authority to dictate.
I think we have the authority. I don't think, but I think the question is what makes sense in the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the rest of the board, I've been struggling with the stormwater issue, and yes, I think history shows that when you have development, you do increase stormwater. I mean, it just happens everywhere. And so the question is, how do you manage it? And I think the applicant has been very responsive. I think over the past year, we've raised questions. The applicant responded to those. Fire pond, weir. So I think, in my mind, they've done what the ordinance, what the planning board has asked of them. I do still have concerns. And I think my biggest concern is that whenever you put in a development and you put in infrastructure like the pond that requires maintenance, that's there forever. And the history has not been great in terms of showing that, particularly in private developments, that ponds get maintained. Typically they don't. So that's my biggest concern is, I know we have an association, and I know the association is responsible for maintenance, but maybe that happens for a couple of years, but 5 years out, 10 years out, what happens with that pond? How do we ensure that continues to get maintained? That's my biggest concern, and it's not one that I can pull something out of a hat and say, this is how we need to address it. Because, I mean, that was something, back when I was working at DEP, this was a constant issue. I mean, we approve projects all the time at standards. But if they don't get maintained, then where are you?
So we've told them that we think we have an issue with stormwater plan. We don't know exactly by how much, to what degree. We can't put a number on it. We can't prove it scientifically. We have an opinion that's there. So if it's just going to be our opinion, then we owe them a standard to which they must comply. They comply with they comply with the LUO, they comply with everything that we've asked them, except we're not satisfied. What
Okay, and
exactly,
this is
what exactly are we not satisfied with?
This
By
is,
how much and what's the remedy?
this is a conversation about people's concerns about how we should go forward with this application. It's not a decision at this point. It's an opportunity to talk about this. I think it's important.
But base it in fact. And I mean, these people have been delayed for God knows how long.
They've not been delayed.
Yes, they have been. I've watched it. I've been part of this. This is why I'm here, Paul, because of this. This, you know, let's continue, but let's speak factually. If they've not complied with something, let's tell them exactly how they've not complied. Let's give them the standard, let's tell them how to hit that standard, and let's move forward.
That's the intent, is to
Okay.
move forward.
So what's
But
the
this
problem
is
with
a
stormwater?
conversation, and it's a conversation we need to have about how planning board members are looking at these issues, whether or not we think they've complied, or there concerns. How do we want to address those? Do we want to address them? So it's not, the fact that someone expresses a concern about a particular issue doesn't mean that we're gonna place a new requirement on them.
Okay. But these conversations are expensive to the applicants, to the citizens, to the people who want to live in the state of in the town of Readfield.
And
There's a cost associated with this.
I get that, but these conversations are important from
Okay,
a
so how long,
process perspective.
are we gonna resolve these conversations tonight, or are we gonna continue to keep this going?
Coming in here tonight, it was my intent that we would deliberate on this application and hopefully make a decision. I said that at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
But we haven't gotten very far yet, so.
So, I have a question for you. When you say these, I think you said these standards.
For stormwater,
Right,
in the land use ordinance, in my view, it does.
so, so when it says where possible, maintain wooded areas, reduce runoff and infiltration of soil. How is that?
Well, it's not necessarily imprecise, because all it says is effort should be made, in the ordinance says that effort should be made to minimize additional runoff. That is a result of the development, runoff that would be more than pre-development runoff. And to do that, where possible, natural features should be used. It doesn't mandate a particular natural feature. But, so it's a question really of degree and of our judgment as to whether any particular developer has done enough. It's our judgment ultimately.
Yeah, I think if you were to regrade the property, so all the runoff went to Juniper Lane and road ditches, and all the runoff went down those ditches, that would be a problem. What I see here doesn't show that. Now, I can't guarantee, how each individual lot owner is going to develop their property, and if they build up the grade and send the runoff down their driveway to the Juniper Lane, I can't guarantee that, but based on the contours on the plan, I don't think that's likely. There will be runoff that will come down the road, the pond will be used. It will be important to be maintained.
So wooded buffers not help.
I mean, I think they will be there anyway. I actually agree with Barry about that. I think there will be wooded buffers between the properties. So I'm not really concerned about that.
No, it seems to me that there's an issue here about stormwater. And we wanna try to make sure that, the approval for this, project doesn't exacerbate the stormwater issues. So I guess, we're trying to figure out whether or not there are ways that, it could be, more, better protected.
In part of the application materials that came in quite a while ago, I know that, the applicant did present a pre and post development runoff numbers, which indicated that on the site, if I remember correctly, on the site as a whole, there was a slight decrease in post versus pre. Did I remember that correctly?
I believe so, Madam Chairman.
So there, there is that. I think, what Jack was pursuing with the wooded buffers was, an enhancement, not necessarily, to meet the standard per se, but an enhancement to the stormwater control system. But we do have that pre and post flow data in the application.
And what does it mean on the plan here, the non-buildable area, natural vegetation? Does that mean that it's supposed to be, the homeowner is supposed to maintain natural vegetation there or what? Like,
It means that there's natural vegetation in there, or it's non-developable area, meaning that it's within the, or outside of the building envelope. So we're showing like the ground is that building envelope, right? And then the building can't go in these areas, nor can it go in these areas, because that's a stream buffer, which is also an actual wooded buffer, so that's gonna stay wooded. Nor are we allowing homeowners to cross this stream to go over here and build their home. We're using this stream to simply as a barrier. So that's what we're trying to show.
what's meant by natural vegetation?
I'm sorry, Jack, I couldn't hear you.
What's meant by natural vegetation?
Reads for light green, non-buildable area or natural vegetation.
Would that be lawn?
It would, yes, it would be vegetated in some way. So that was the intent. This plan here was something where the board asked for clarification as to what the building is. I want to emphasize that, again, you're looking at a quarter acre to a half an acre per lot, and a lot of these lots are rather large. So the actual impact area per lot is pretty small compared to the parcel altogether.
Other planning board members, comments, questions?
I think we've done everything. Yeah, so, it's a wet hillside. It's been wet, it's been wet. Small, no, in the big picture that you're gonna disturb. I don't really think, but I think it's not anything we can.
Okay, anything else on stormwater?
I was just thinking about my comment about the maintaining of the
Yeah.
pond and all.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, perhaps we can address a poor condition of fire inspections happen some frequency or.
I think there are applications that we do it annually or after the storm.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out how do you increase the likelihood that that will happen on a pond.
And so including it theoretically as a condition might increase the chances of it actually occurring.
Who would inspect the pond? Who would do that? Who would inspect it? That would go. They don't want to do it with. They're going to you know, you say they fail.
Right.
So who would they have inspected that would give it,
Yeah, I mean,
how does that work?
I know with engineering structures in the past, it's been a requirement that a licensed PE engineer have to do the inspection.
I wouldn't move forward about that. Full of water, cattail, must be working.
Well, not necessarily because of,
Right.
you know, if it's silted in.
What would you say about an appropriate party to be doing such an inspection?
Take no objection to that, Madam Chairman.
Who? Just any old PE? Or-
We think of ourselves as little more than any LPs, I'll say that. We take no exception to annual inspections. Usually a PE is required, I think it's SLOTA and maybe chapter 500 rules, which this is just a permit by rule for Maine DEP. I do want to clarify that. But we don't have any objection to having an annual inspection by a PE. A lot of projects are like that. It seems fairly normal.
Who do you submit the inspection to?
Who will we want to?
Who would you submit it to the code enforcement officer? You and if there's an issue with it,
We can submit it to the code enforcement officer, it's fine.
is that part of your purview to?
My reviews, whatever you wish.
And that's typically the way that would work. If we wrote something into an approval, we would, for that kind of thing, we would typically say that it was submitted to the CEO. Thanks. Mark. Other comments from I did want to mention the well issue because there was a fair amount of conversation around that. And the concerns that were raised were about groundwater supply and potential impact that a number of new wells could have on the regional groundwater quantity. There is a statement in the application from hydrogeologists that says that there should be sufficient water to serve the subdivision and that drawing that water should not have an adverse impact on the surrounding land. Personally, I'm inclined to accept that conclusion of the hydrogeologist on that point. I think that that's kind of where the conversation took us on that, but I'm comfortable with the 9 new wells, 8 new wells. I don't think is going to make an enormous difference in terms of groundwater quantity, but I did want to put the issue on the table so that we can have some conversation.
I agree, 8 new wells for residential use should not, if there's no way to that one could possibly conclude that that would have a significant impact. It might, but there's no way to conclude that, so I, no problem with it.
Any other thoughts about that?
It would also be very difficult to determine. Could be a conflict. Yeah, we can do that.
In the grand scheme of things, it's a, it's a fairly small development, and a handful of new residential wells. I think, it's unlikely. Fall and spring, that's a different matter. That's not what we're talking about here. Other thoughts about that, other comments? One of the issues that came up in a couple of points was around road construction specifications and when would road construction plans actually be developed and available. I don't know if you have information about that or not.
Road construction plans,
Right,
you mean above and beyond what the application contains?
right. The details. I think the issue was, whether or not those plans would reflect the requirements in the ordinance for road construction. And, will ensure that they do, but they need to show up at some point on the plan. So I think that was the genesis of that question.
I'm a little confused by the point. So let me try to clarify. I'll just respond what I think you're asking for, is that the applicant is going to produce additional documents in order to construct the road, and that those documents should contain additional details above and beyond the town ordinance requirements that are already on the plan?
No, not above and beyond. Just when we discussed this, the concern that I heard raised was that the road needed to comply with the standards in the ordinance.
Yes.
But the plan did not exist. Is it all there now?
I believe it is.
It is, okay.
Yes. Oftentimes on a construction project, what you'll see is if it goes out to a bidding process, especially a public project has to go out to a bidding process, then you'll see a set of construction documents after the permit is sent. But on a privately held project, the applicant has the option of building the project based on those plans right there. And I believe that's John's plan in this case, because he already has a contractor, he already has a price, and he's ready to go with those. So it is our intention to meet code.
Sure.
As code officer, the names. We've had some special experiences, I shall say, in the past year or so. What I'd be looking for, I need, and I hope the board agrees, we need a final stamped plan. One that I have, that there's no discussion after the fact that what we meant, what we said, what happened in the meeting. I'd like to have a final stamped plan before it moves in.
And you're talking about a plan for road construction. Is that what
Correct.
you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
Who's the stamp on? Who stamps it?
He can stamp.
Okay.
So it's just-
I take no objection.
So you're building the road to the town private road standards.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think the last issue I have on my list that I wanted to put out to the applicant is that we also had an issue that came up concerning the matter of concern about buyers of these properties and the waterfront access issue. We all understand that there is no waterfront access that is being provided with purchase of these lots. Is there a way that is made clear or could be made clear to buyers that there is no association between this subdivision and the Manitoba property zone?
Yeah, we discussed this earlier. We do not have any intention of marketing these lots or telling lot buyers that they have access to any neighboring properties. Buying a piece of property does not give you access to someone else's property. We felt like Manitoba had invested the property in question with the waterfront. They have that very clearly marked with no trespassing signs. I drove down there earlier in this process, it was last year, just to look around and make sure that like, okay, well, I want to be able to talk from firsthand knowledge, but I saw the no trespassing signs, I turned around and I left. That's,
So you don't think the potential for that confusion exists?
we do not feel it exists because nobody gets access to somebody else's land by buying or owning a abutting piece of land. That's, there should be no expectation of that from any.
I think it's important to clarify too, that we asked the applicant about this last week, and he said that it was a misrepresentation. There shouldn't be a motive behind it, you know, borderline slanders.
Well, wasn't that that incident, was that a creation of someone else, that alleged marketing, or was that still in a different lot altogether? Not part of the subdivision?
Can't speak to the specifics of that, because I read it too long ago. But the lots will not be marketed as access to anyone else's property just by right of buying a lot in the subdivision. I'm not sure if that helps clarify. There were some things said in some of those comments that were egregious, in my opinion. But
I'm sorry, what?
I said the word, I used the word egregious.
What was agreed to be?
I addressed the board. But in my opinion, since they came up, I wanted to address that. But yeah, there's no right to use.
And the reason for my question is not even about that whole situation, it was just in general. You know, do you think that there's potential for people to be confused about that? And your answer is no.
I don't believe so. People get confused over just about anything. I've seen some confusion right here tonight. So, and I felt some confusion myself. But no, not in specifically. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there other specific issues? Anybody have,
Issues that you'd like to put on the table for discussion that we haven't talked about yet? If not, I'd like to just take a couple of minutes, and as I mentioned before, go down through the list of standards and the site review piece, which is on page 22 in the ordinance. And not to talk in detail about every single one of them, but just for everyone to go down and quickly review them to ensure that you don't have any remaining questions or issues, and that you're comfortable that each of these has been addressed in some way. Some of them are really not relevant, but The first one by way of example is aesthetic, cultural, and natural values, and that's the category that I would put all of the, we talked a lot about the salamander survey and other natural resources, fish and wildlife weigh in. It's those kinds of issues that show up here under that standard. We had a fair amount of discussion about all of that. Surveys were completed, and we have that information in the application. What we're talking about is conformity with local ordinances and plans. Erosion control, that's something that's been covered several different ways through the application process, and it's certainly addressed by the standard conditions and performance standards in the ordinance. Financial burden on the town, financial and technical capacity. We do have statements from the applicant on both of those points. Flood areas are not relevant here. Wetlands, what we discovered during the course of review is that there are no wetlands other than forested wetlands on this site. And those are not regulated specifically, but they are depicted on the plans. Groundwater, we've talked about that in terms of the wells because it talks about the activity potentially impacting the quality and quantity of groundwater. Municipal solid waste disposal. Number 10 is about public water supplies, which we don't have here. General standard about adjacent land uses not having detrimental effects from glare, noise, waste, etc. General pollution standard, air, water pollution. Number 13, undue impact on the water body. Wastewater disposal, we do have detailed information about septic systems that came in through the application process. Number 15, stormwater. Obviously have detailed conversation around that. Sufficient water as part of the well discussion. We've talked about traffic in terms of the use of Lane Road and Minnesota Camp Road, and there are pieces in the application that address the minimal traffic impacts that are anticipated. Legal access, we've been talking about that a bit this evening with the plan and the abandoned road. No impact on adjoining municipalities. Life and fire safety. If I remember correctly, the fire chief did have a conversation with the applicant about those issues. There are no current violations on the property. The timber harvesting standard is, we received a statement on that early on in the application process to meet that standard. And road construction, we've been talking about that at various points. So are there any additional thoughts that you have given the list of standards, the issues that we've covered tonight? Anything else that you feel that we should cover? Okay. There are a few things that I noted that potentially we might want to condition the application having an approval with or a decision with. One is making it clear that about the developer retaining responsibility for road and infrastructure maintenance until the association takes over that responsibility. Just heard that we need a final road construction plan. that will be compliant with the LUO's road construction specifications. And
There's also some verification requirements.
in the road standards, so they would have to comply with the standards. So there's something in there already. So, the condition could be around, full compliance with the LUO's road standards. Including notification requirements and the provision of the, preparation and provision of the final road construction plan to show.
So normally on this, site, the approved site plan. Conditions and covenants on these things that you're talking about.
I was thinking about them being conditions of approval. That was my thought rather than. I suppose they could go on.
I mean, I'm not sure which goes on the plan.
I think the plan typically would include things that are related to those, on the ground issues that are raised by the plan itself, rather than something like a final road construction plan.
So like the maintenance of the fire pond and the. It's hard to hear you, Max. The maintenance of the fire pond, the weir, the road spreader and all that. What you had mentioned was inspection once a year and it's needed after a storm. Is that something that would go on the plan?
Is that something you typically put on the plan itself? No.
No, not usually. Usually it would end up in a bylaw or a condition of approval if you feel the need for it. We could take exceptions to make sure that condition.
But you wouldn't typically put something like that on the plan itself.
No, not a maintenance.
Yeah.
What do you usually put on the plan?
I'm sorry, Jack, I can't hear you.
What sort of notes do you usually put on the plan?
What set of notes do we usually put on?
Yeah. As opposed to just a decision.
I'm sorry, Jack. My hearing is not as good as it used to be, and I just can't hear
I
you.
was just wondering what notes you usually put on the plan as opposed to in the decision.
Usually the construction notes go on the plan, on the road plans and on the drawing set. Maintenance notes are usually something that goes in the road association or as a condition or something like that would be fine. I'm not sure if I'm helping here, but.
Yeah, that's fine, we can, put it elsewhere. Anything additionally? If there's nothing else, I would suggest that a motion is in order.
I would move to approve the plan as amended with the following condition, that there be at least an annual inspection of the fire pond by a professional engineer. And the further condition that the final road construction plan stamped by a professional engineer be submitted to our code enforcement officer.
Standard conditions.
And whatever those standard conditions are, yes,
The other one that we had talked about was as a condition was ensuring that the developer, making it clear that the developer remains responsible for the road and infrastructure of the association.
oh, that's true. It's, at this point, it's only in Attorney McCullum's letter, so I guess we should put that as a condition.
So that would be a condition to ensure that the applicant remains responsible for road and infrastructure maintenance until such point that the association takes over that responsibility for. Is that it?
Good.
Is there a second? Motion. Second, further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Again, thank you all very much. We appreciate your participation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
Hi, Andrew. Just a point of clarification, possibly. The motion was made, the plans as amended. There was several different amendments. Could we just have it be as amended on June 24, just to be clear, so we know which version it is?
Well, there were
Well, we
lots
said
of,
it several times. Mr. Ketter said it several times.
Okay.
It's amended several times, and it's most recently amended June 24th.
Very good. It was more a reference on the minutes when they're typed up later, that's all. Thank you.
thank you very much.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yes, we have plans for signature. Do you want to sign the plan?
I think it probably would be easier if you left them with Chip and we can sign them, at our leisure, like we have done before.
Correct.
That's absolutely fine.
This will be a final plan for me to, this will be a final plan for me to do my job.
Excuse me, we still have a little business to conduct, so if you could take your conversation downstairs. You're welcome to stay, sir. Yeah, so we could give them to Chip and we'll get signatures.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
The only other issue that we have is that we have minutes from May 13th. They weren't terribly lengthy. I only have one comment on them, and that is that there are a couple of places where road commission is mentioned, and it should be road commission.
Okay.
Change that.
Appreciate it.
Anything else on minutes for 5:13? I have a motion. Looking for a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Stay. concludes our meeting. Thank you all very much.
Do we know when our next meeting is gonna take place?
Oh, yeah, we should talk about that. Yeah, we are not going to meet, there were a lot of us missing on July 8th. And so we agreed that we would not hold a meeting on the 8th. And our next meeting will be the 22nd of July.
Yeah,
We have Hatch and Poulin for hearing that night.
site visit.
There was a site visit scheduled, so if that's not it.
So site visit also the 22nd?
Yes, so it's not a particularly large piece of property. I don't think there's a whole lot to see. We could probably do it at 5:45.
Right on.
Yeah, so Poulin site visit at 5:40. Can you let him know that and make sure that he'll be available
He already knows.
to be there at 5:45?
He wanted to know if he needed hors d'oeuvres or something. Yes. Yes. Snails.
Okay, so site visit, Poulin, 5:45, and then regular meeting at 6:30 on the 22nd. Okay, thank you. We're adjourned.
So,